The great neutral space station Orions crown floated in the deep black between the stars, its massive silver rings turning slowly, carrying thousands of travelers, traders, and soldiers from 100 different worlds. It was a place where no one species claimed power, a place where peace was kept by strict law, yet whispers of rivalry and pride always lingered in the air. On this day, the central plaza was crowded beyond measure, as word spread that Vorak the combat master had arrived. Vorak was known throughout the spiral arm, his name spoken with both respect and fear, for he had never lost a duel in over 50 years of public challenges. He had beaten warlords with titanium claws, cyborg mercenaries with enhanced reflexes, even creatures from high-gravity worlds whose strength could bend steel. He fought for honor and pride, but also for the thrill of proving superiority, the station's arena was set in the middle of the plaza, its clear energy dome shimmering in the light. Alien merchants paused their trading, soldiers leaned against walls, and travelers rushed to find a place to watch. Vorak stood inside the dome, his tall frame casting a long shadow, his bone-plated skin reflecting the lights above. 4 powerful arms hung at his sides, each corded with muscle. His black eyes scanned the crowd with slow confidence, as if he already knew none could match him. He raised his voice so that the sound carried far across the plaza and beyond, amplified by the arena's speakers. He spoke of how the galaxy was filled with strong and worthy warriors, but that humans were not among them. His tone was sharp, every word meant to cut. He called them soft, fragile, easily broken. He said they relied too much on machines and not enough on their own bodies. The crowd responded with mixed sounds. Some laughed, some jeered, some shouted. In defense, when Vorak finished his speech, he issued his challenge as he had done on countless worlds. Any human who believed they had the courage could step forward and face him. The prize for victory would be glory and respect across the stars. The price of defeat would be public humiliation, kneeling before him and admitting the superiority of his kind. No one moved at first. The human travelers in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, some muttering that no one could defeat Vorak in hand-to-hand combat. For a moment, it seemed the challenge would go unanswered, and Vorak's mocking smile widened. But then a figure in a plain gray jacket began to walk toward the dome. Daniel had been standing near the back, arms folded, watching without expression. He was not tall by alien standards, his build lean rather than heavy, but his movements were smooth and balanced. He worked as a cargo handler on the station. At least that was what most people believed. Few knew of his past, fewer still had seen him fight. His boots made no sound on the metal floor as he stepped forward, the crowd parting in surprise. Some humans whispered that he was making a mistake, that Vorak would crush him in seconds. Others felt a spark of pride at the sight of one of their own answering the call. Vorak's eyes narrowed as Daniel approached. He looked the human up and down, clearly unimpressed. He asked Daniel his name and whether he understood the terms of the duel. Daniel spoke simply, saying only that he accepted. His voice was calm and steady, without anger or bravado. The arena doors opened, and he stepped inside. Vorak towered over him by nearly 2 heads, his shadow falling across Daniel's face, yet the human did not flinch. Around them the transparent dome sealed shut, the air inside humming faintly as the gravity regulators came online. The match would be fought in shifting conditions, gravity changing from light to heavy without warning, the floor transforming into slopes, ridges and drops, all designed to test a fighter's adaptability. The referee, a tall insectoid official from a neutral race, explained the rules once more. No weapons, no armor, victory by knockout or submission, and both fighters must obey the arena's systems. The crowd pressed closer against the outer walls, eager to see the outcome. The lights brightened, the floor shimmered with the first shift in terrain, and the duel began. Vorak moved first, his forearms spreading wide as he stepped forward with surprising speed for his size. His upper right arm swung in a wide arc, a blow that could have shattered bone if it landed. Daniel slid back just enough for the strike to miss, his eyes never leaving his opponent. Vorak attacked again and again, his heavy footsteps thudding against the floor. Daniel's movements were measured, each step placed with purpose, always keeping him just out of reach. He made no attempt to strike yet, only watching, feeling the rhythm of the alien's attacks, the timing of his weight. Shifts, the tension in his muscles before each swing. The crowd began to murmur. Some thought Daniel was afraid to fight. Others guessed he was tiring Vorak out. Vorak's expression shifted to irritation. He lunged forward, sweeping low with one arm while striking high with another, forcing Daniel to leap to the side as the gravity shifted suddenly to double strength. The human landed heavily, his knees bending to absorb the weight, but he recovered quickly. Vorak pressed the attack, confident that the human could not withstand both his strength and the arena's tricks for long. Daniel's mind was calm despite the storm of movement. He had fought in zero-gravity cargo bays, in the narrow corridors of mining stations, and in dusty fields under blazing alien suns. He knew that strength alone did not win battles. Timing, patience, and the ability to read an opponent mattered more. Vorak was powerful, but his style was direct, relying on intimidation and overwhelming force. Daniel knew that somewhere in the flow of those attacks there would be an opening. The duel continued for several minutes, the arena shifting from heavy gravity to near weightlessness, the floor tilting and rolling underfoot. Vorak adjusted with the ease of long practice, but Daniel adapted with a different kind of grace, using the changes to slip away from blows that should have landed. The alien's frustration grew with each miss, his strikes becoming just a little wilder, his breathing a little heavier. The crowd could sense the tension building, the unspoken question of whether the unremarkable human might actually have a chance against the legendary master by the time the gravity steadied again. Vorak had driven Daniel toward the edge of the arena. The alien's eyes glinted with triumph as he prepared a crushing final blow meant to end the match quickly. Daniel's gaze sharpened, his weight shifting slightly, ready for what was to come. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the impact that would decide the duel's first act. The crushing blow Vorak had prepared came down with the speed and weight of a collapsing bulkhead, his lower left arm sweeping low to block Daniel's escape while his upper right hand aimed straight for the human's head. The sound of the strike cutting through the air made the closest spectators flinch, but in that split moment, Daniel dropped his weight to one side, letting the momentum of the alien's own swing pass harmlessly over him. He stepped back once, twice, keeping just enough distance that the heavy bone-plated knuckles barely grazed the edge of his jacket. Vorak did not pause, his other arms already driving forward, turning his attack into a relentless storm. Daniel shifted constantly, letting his opponent's force burn through space without finding purchase. His eyes sharp, his breathing steady, every movement flowing into the next without hesitation. The arena floor beneath them shimmered and shifted again, changing from smooth alloy to a surface of jagged crystalline ridges. The gravity lightened suddenly, making each step a fraction too long, each leap carry further than expected. Vorak took advantage of it, bounding forward with frightening speed and height, his forearms striking in a coordinated assault from multiple angles. Daniel let himself fall backward, using the lighter gravity to twist mid-air and push off a ridge, spinning away from the alien's reach. He landed low, one hand brushing the floor for balance before moving again. The crowd's shouts and gasps echoed within the dome, each narrow escape adding to the energy. It was clear to those watching closely that Daniel's strategy was not simply to avoid being hit, but to observe everything Vorak did. The angle of his stance, the way his lower arms moved slightly before his upper ones followed, the small pause between a lunge and a follow-up strike. All these details Daniel stored away, his mind working in silence. He knew that in a battle against someone faster or stronger, the smallest patterns could decide the outcome. Vorok's confidence, while unshaken, was slowly being tested as each attack failed to land with the force he intended. The combat master switched tactics, lowering his stance to reduce the space Daniel could exploit. He stepped in hard, sweeping two arms in wide arcs while the other two jabbed quickly toward Daniel's midsection. The human blocked one strike with his forearm, feeling the jolt rattle up into his shoulder, then turned aside, letting the others miss by a breath. The gravity shifted again, suddenly pressing down with double force, pulling at every muscle. Movements became heavier, slower. Vorok grinned at this change, his natural strength giving him the advantage in such conditions. He drove forward, his steps booming like hammers against the floor. Daniel's legs absorbed the increased weight with a slight bend, his mind adjusting to the new pace instantly. He let Vorok come close, then slipped to the side just as the alien's upper right fist crashed down. The floor where the blow landed cracked under the impact, fragments scattering. Daniel stayed light on his feet despite the pull of the heavy gravity, circling, waiting. Vorok pressed harder, aiming to corner him once more, but the human kept sliding along the edges, forcing the alien to turn and adjust again and again. The crowd began to notice that Vorok, for all his power, was expending more energy than his opponent. The next change came. Without warning, the arena switching to near weightlessness. Both fighters lifted slightly off the ground, their steps becoming glides. Vorok lunged, his mass carrying him forward like a missile, all four arms ready to crush. Daniel tucked his knees, spun, and used the alien's own rush to twist past him. The move was so quick that for a heartbeat Vorok struck only empty air, his momentum carrying him toward the far side of the dome. He landed against the wall with a deep thud, the energy shield sparking faintly around him. He pushed away immediately, but his expression had changed, less confident now, more focused, the arrogance replaced by a clear understanding that this human was not like the others he had faced. The crowd roared at the exchange. Some shouted for Daniel to strike, others urged Vorok to crush the challenger quickly. The shifting voices rolled through the air like waves. Daniel heard none of it, his focus entirely on the figure before him. He knew the first half of the fight was about surviving and learning. The second half would be about acting at the right moment. Every choice had to lead toward that moment. Vorok, for all his skill, was beginning to show slight strain, the kind that grew with each missed strike and each forced turn. Alien's next series of attacks was a display of raw speed and precision, each arm moving with its own rhythm, but all coordinated into a deadly flow. Daniel parried one strike with the back of his arm, ducked under the second, slid aside from the third, and spun away from the fourth. His movements were fluid, not rushed, almost as though he had already seen these attacks before they came. Vorok snarled, a deep guttural sound that echoed inside the dome, and shifted his approach again, trying to break through this strange human's defenses. The arena floor now tilted, creating a steep slope. Fighters had to either fight uphill or downhill, a change that could shift balance in an instant. Vorok charged from above, using the slope to increase his speed. But Daniel stepped uphill toward him, cutting the angle and removing the advantage. Their bodies collided briefly, the impact heavy, but Daniel rolled his shoulder to absorb the hit and twisted free before Vorok could lock him in one of his crushing grips. The alien's frustration was growing, though he hid it behind a mask of focus. Daniel caught a brief flicker in his opponent's eyes, a sign that the fight was no longer a simple exhibition for Vorok, but a matter of personal pride. They separated for a moment, circling. The dome's lights glinted off Vorak's bone plating, and the sweat beginning to darken Daniel's jacket. The shifting floor steadied again, gravity returning to normal. Vorak planted his feet and lowered his center of gravity, preparing for another decisive rush. Daniel adjusted his own stance, knees bent slightly, arms loose but ready. The air between them felt charged, the silence from the crowd almost total now as every eye waited for the next exchange. The moment stretched long enough that even the arena's hum seemed distant when Vorak moved. It was with explosive power. All four arms striking in a blinding combination, aimed to overwhelm before defense could be mounted. Daniel met the first strike with a precise deflection, slid aside from the second, leaned away from the third, and stepped in toward the fourth. For the first time he countered, his fist snapping forward to tap against a joint on Vorak's lower arm, not enough to injure, but enough to send a clear message. Vorak paused, eyes narrowing. The human could hit back, and he knew exactly where to strike. The crowd erupted again, their voices echoing against the dome. The balance of the fight had shifted ever so slightly. Vorak straightened, his shoulders rising, his jaw tightening. Daniel simply returned to his stance, breathing slow and even, ready for whatever came next. Somewhere in the space between them, the real battle was only beginning. The air inside the dome felt heavier, though the gravity had not yet changed again. It was the weight of the moment pressing down on every watcher and fighter alike, the sense that the duel had crossed an unseen line and was moving into something far more dangerous. Vorak's black eyes studied Daniel now with a different focus. Gone was the easy arrogance of the opening minutes, replaced by the calculating gaze of a predator who had just realized his prey might also have claws. He shifted his stance, all four arms moving slightly as his shoulders rolled, the bone plates along his forearms catching the arena light. Daniel remained still, only the small rise and fall of his chest showing the steady rhythm of his breathing. His feet were planted lightly, ready to move in any direction, his weight balanced with the kind of precision only years of training could produce. The arena responded with another shift, the gravity pressing down suddenly at 1.5 times. Normal, enough to test endurance, but not enough to slow skilled fighters. The floor transformed into alternating strips of smooth alloy and rough, jagged ridges, a pattern designed to disrupt footwork. Vorak moved first, stepping with careful placement, before unleashing a flurry of strikes, each arm attacking from a different angle, forcing Daniel to read and react at near impossible speed. Daniel's arms blurred as he deflected, redirected, and slipped between the blows, his body weaving in tight arcs that kept him within range, but never still long enough to be caught. The alien's breathing grew louder with the effort, the weight of the gravity making every motion drain more strength than before. Daniel's mind was not empty in these moments. It was alive with memory. He remembered the narrow training halls of the Mars Colony Defense Academy, the endless repetition of drills in low light, the cold of the metal floors under bare feet. He remembered sparring against opponents bigger and faster, learning that every fighter had a pattern, a set of habits they could not entirely erase. He had watched Vorak long enough now to feel the rhythm behind the chaos, the half-second pause before his lower arm struck, the slightly wider stance before a lunge, the way his weight shifted when he tried to corner. Daniel knew that, in a fight of endurance, the smallest cracks in a defense could be pried open wider. With each exchange of Vorak landed a glancing blow against Daniel's shoulder, the impact sending a dull shock through the human's arm. The crowd gasped, sensing the first solid hit, but Daniel used the motion to roll backward, creating space. He shook his arm once, testing the muscle, then moved forward again. There was no sign of hesitation in his eyes. Vorak's lips curled in what might have been a smile or a snarl, his voice rumbling low enough to carry through the arena's comes. He told Daniel that humans were stubborn, but that stubbornness would not save him here. Daniel's answer was a simple shift of his stance, an unspoken signal that he was ready for more. The gravity eased suddenly, almost to the point of weightlessness, and the floor became a wide, flat expanse. Fighters often made mistakes here, misjudging their movements in the near float. Vorak leapt forward, twisting his body to strike from above and below at the same time, a maneuver that had ended many duels in his favor. Daniel bent backward, in midair, letting the strikes pass above his chest, then kicked off the floor lightly to drift just out of range. The moment his boots touched the surface again, he was already moving, sidestepping a follow-up and tapping Vorak's knee joint with a quick strike before retreating. The hit was light, almost casual, but it made the alien's leg shift slightly off balance for a moment, a reminder that Daniel was not simply defending anymore on the arena. The crowd's voices rose and fell like a living tide, some calling for Daniel to press his advantage, others urging Vorak to end it with one decisive blow. The shifting gravity made the fight unpredictable, the fighters adapting in real time to every change. The combat master was still dangerous, his power undiminished, but the rhythm of the duel had shifted just enough that the watchers could feel it in their bones. Daniel was no longer simply avoiding defeat. He was beginning to shape the battle itself. A sudden memory flickered again through Daniel's mind. The dusty courtyard of a frontier station where he had once fought to defend a group of settlers from raiders. The feeling then was the same as now, a larger, stronger enemy who believed victory was already theirs. He had learned that arrogance made the strongest fighter careless if pushed in the right way. Vorak was not careless yet, but Daniel could see the edges fraying, the way the alien strikes came just a little faster than they should, as though he was trying to force the fight to end before more openings appeared. The arena floor rippled now into a pattern of rising and falling steps, the gravity settling back to normal. Vorak surged forward, stepping across the uneven terrain with skill, his four arms moving in a complex weave, meant to drive Daniel upward into a high ridge where movement would be harder. Daniel gave ground, but not without intent, letting the alien believe he was being driven back. When they reached the ridge's peak, Vorak struck hard from both sides at once, a move meant to trap and crush. Daniel bent low, letting the strikes pass over him, then swept his leg behind Vorak's ankle, using the alien's own forward motion to send him stumbling down the other side. It was not a fall that would injure, but the sound of the crowd's roar told everyone it was a turning point. For the first time in the fight, Vorak's balance had been broken. The combat master caught himself before hitting the floor and spun to face Daniel again, his expression unreadable but his movements sharper now. The two men circled, the shifting lights of the arena casting long shadows. Daniel could feel the rhythm of Vorak's breathing, the heat of the fight building between them, the thin thread of tension that connected each step and strike. He knew the real test was coming soon, the moment when one of them would commit fully. His body was ready, his mind clear. Vorak adjusted his stance, lowering himself for another rush, and Daniel mirrored him. Both fighters locked and silent, understanding that the next exchange might change the duel entirely. Crowds' cheers and shouts blurred into a distant hum, the world narrowing to the space between them. The arena's hum deepened as the systems prepared another environmental shift. Daniel could feel it through the soles of his boots, the subtle vibration before the next test began. He kept his gaze locked on Vorak, watching for the smallest tell, the briefest sign, knowing that when the moment came, he would have to take it without hesitation. The turning point had arrived, and both of them knew it. The arena shifted again with a low hum, the gravity pulling heavier than before, but not to the point of slowing them into clumsy movement, just enough to make every strike demand more strength, and every step carry more weight. The floor became uneven, forming clusters of raised platforms scattered like stepping stones, across a shallow metallic basin. This terrain meant that quick movement was risky, as a misstep could twist an ankle or leave a fighter open for a strike. Vorak took the high ground first, his large frame balanced on a platform as he looked down at Daniel with the gaze of a hunter preparing to close the trap. Daniel stepped lightly from one platform to the next, his boots making no sound, his eyes locked on his opponent's every motion. Vorak attacked without warning, leaping from his height with all four arms raised. The impact of his landing sent a deep vibration through the platforms around him, the sound echoing in the dome like a drumbeat. Daniel bent at the knees, slipping to the side as the alien's fists crashed into the space where he had been. Heartbeat before. Vorak followed with a sweeping kick, but Daniel used the platform's edge to spring upward, twisting mid-air to land behind his opponent. He struck quickly at the back of Vorak's knee joint, not hard enough to cause real injury yet, but enough to make the alien's leg falter for a fraction of a second. That small opening carried weight. Daniel knew that when repeated, such strikes could break through even the toughest guard. The crowd could sense the shift in momentum now, voices rising in excitement. Some alien spectators shouted in their own languages, their words carrying tones of surprise and disbelief. Vorak was still strong, still dangerous, but Daniel was moving differently now. He was no longer just defending. His steps carried the intention of attack. Each motion of his body was aimed toward disrupting his opponent's balance. Each dodge placed not only to avoid harm, but to draw out a reaction he could use. Vorak noticed it too, his eyes narrowing as his strikes grew faster, heavier, as though he could crush the change before it took full hold. The platform shifted suddenly under their feet, the arena's systems adding another layer of difficulty. Some lowered while others rose higher, creating new high points and sudden gaps. Daniel adapted instantly, using the changes to keep his movement unpredictable. Vorak was powerful enough to leap the gaps easily, but his landings carried more weight, each one forcing him to adjust before striking. Daniel used these moments to dart in and out, touching the alien's joints with quick, sharp blows before slipping away. He was testing the limits now, seeing how much pressure Vorak's body could take without losing strength. And each strike was a silent warning that the pressure could be increased at any moment. Combat Master's breathing had grown louder, the effort of keeping pace with the agile human starting to show. He attacked again with a rush that shook the nearby platforms, but Daniel pivoted on one foot, letting the alien's weight carry him forward. In that instant, Daniel stepped inside the arc of an upper arm and drove his elbow into the soft gap, just under the bone plating near the ribs. The strike was precise, targeted at a spot where even Vorak's natural armor could not fully shield. The alien grunted, a sound more of surprise than pain, and stumbled half a step back. The crowd roared at the sight, the energy in the dome surging. Daniel did not follow with a reckless rush. Instead, he circled, keeping his distance, forcing Vorak to come to him. This was the pattern he had been shaping from the start: make the opponent spend more energy, draw them into committing their strength, and then answer at the moment they were least ready. Vorak lunged again, and Daniel met the attack with a sidestep that became a hook of his leg around the alien's ankle. Using the heavier gravity and Vorak's forward momentum, Daniel twisted sharply, pulling the larger fighter off balance. Vorak crashed onto a lower platform, the impact making the metal ring. For a heartbeat, the great combat master was on one knee, and the crowd's cheers became a wave that rolled around the arena. Vorak pushed himself up quickly, fury burning in his eyes now. He came forward with a burst of speed that showed he was done testing the human and was ready to end the fight by force. His forearms blurred, a storm of strikes aimed high, low, and from the sides. Daniel's focus sharpened to a razor edge. He deflected 2 strikes, stepped under the third, and angled his body so the fourth passed by harmlessly. Then, in that narrow gap, He planted his foot against a ridge in the floor and launched upward, driving his knee into Varrock's jaw with the force of his whole body. The sound of the impact was sharp and heavy, and for the first time Varrock staggered back several steps. The moment felt like the air itself had paused, the crowd holding its breath as the combat master steadied himself. Daniel's chest rose and fell with measured breaths, sweat marking lines along his temple, but his eyes still locked with unshaken focus. Varrock shook his head once, then lowered his stance again, clearly refusing to yield. Yet the fight's balance had shifted in truth. Now Daniel had proven he could hurt enough to make the alien falter, and Varrock knew it. The platforms beneath them began lowering back into a flat surface, the gravity staying heavy as though the arena sensed. The duel was reaching its climax. Varrock's next rush came with a roar, his forearms striking in patterns too fast for an untrained eye to follow. Daniel met him head-on this time, his forearms and elbows deflecting blows while his feet kept shifting for perfect placement. The two collided again and again in the center of the dome, the sound of bone plate against muscle, the echo of each step ringing out. Daniel waited until Varrock committed his weight forward for a heavy swing, then pivoted sharply, using the alien's own mass to throw him off balance. With a twist of his hips, Daniel sent Varrock rolling across the floor, the combat master catching himself just before he slid into the edge of the arena. The crowd's roar became deafening. Many had never seen Varrock thrown before. The alien rose slowly, his breathing deep, his eyes burning with both anger and respect. Daniel stood ready, body loose, gaze steady. The fight was not over, but the breakthrough had come. Varrock now understood that this human was not prey, not an easy opponent to crush for entertainment. This was a duel in which either could fall, and that knowledge would shape the final moments to come. Crowd around the arena was roaring with excitement, and the air was thick with the smell of energy, burning weapons and the heat of the massive lights above the metal floor. The human warrior stood still in the center of the ring, his breathing steady, his eyes fixed on the alien combat master, who now looked very different from when the challenge had started. The alien's confidence had been stripped away. Like layers of fragile cloth torn in a storm, his tall frame now leaned forward, his legs heavy with exhaustion, and his arms shaking from the blows he had taken. His eyes, which had once burned with arrogance, now flickered with doubt and even fear. Human did not rush forward, for he knew that his strength was not just in his speed or his muscle, but in his ability to read the battlefield and the mind of his opponent. He let the alien move first, and the alien did with a sudden burst of energy. Swinging his heavy-bladed weapon in a wide arc, the human slid onto the strike and came up behind him, delivering a sharp hit to the alien's back with the edge of his hand. The alien staggered forward, almost falling to his knees. The crowd gasped, for they knew the fight was turning. The alien combat master tried again, charging with a loud cry, but the human sidestepped and used the alien's own momentum to throw him across the floor. The sound of metal against metal echoed through the arena. The alien scrambled to his feet, his breathing ragged sweat and strange green blood running down his arm. The human spoke in a calm but firm voice, telling him to yield before he was hurt beyond recovery. But the alien's pride refused to let him stop. The fight became a dance of skill and survival. The alien swung again and again, each strike stronger than the last, but each one met with the human's precise blocks and counterstrikes. The human's movements were smooth like water flowing around stone, never forcing, always guiding the alien into worse positions. Finally, the human caught the alien's weapon between his own arms, twisted hard, and tore it free in one swift motion. He dropped the weapon to the side and struck the alien in the chest with the heel of his palm. The alien fell flat on his back. The arena fell silent for a moment. The human stood over him, offering his hand to help him up, and the alien hesitated, but then accepted the human's grip. The crowd erupted into cheers. Not for the aliens' defeat, but for the skill and honor they had just witnessed the alien combat. Master, now breathing heavily, admitted in a strained voice that he had underestimated the human, and that this was a mistake. He would not forget. The human nodded and told him that real strength was not in showing off, but in knowing when to learn and adapt. The officials announced the human as the victor, and the arena filled with the sound of approval from thousands of voices. The alien combat master bowed slightly, a gesture rare for his kind, and walked away slowly, his pride wounded. His mind changed about what humans were capable of. The human turned and left the arena as well, his head held high but without arrogance, for he knew that every battle was a lesson, and that respect was worth more than any trophy or title. When the lights dimmed and the crowd began to leave, the story of that fight began to spread across the stations and colonies faster than any news of trade or politics. People spoke of the human who had faced an alien combat master and won not by brute force alone, but by skill, patience, and strategy. Some told it as a warning to never judge a human by their appearance. Others told it as an inspiration that no matter how great the challenge, it could be faced with courage and with the alien combat. Master would later return to his home world and speak of the human warrior with respect, sharing the lessons he had learned from that day. The human, meanwhile, continued his journey through the stars, ready for whatever test came next, knowing that somewhere out there more challenges waited, and that he would face them as he had faced this one, calm, steady, and unshaken. The memory of that arena battle would remain for years, a shining example of the moment an alien learned that challenging a human might be the greatest mistake a warrior could make, and yet also the greatest lesson they could ever receive. The end.